Hey everybody, it's episode 330.
We are talking for the month of June Dairy Days. We are talking milk.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Prime Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Skip Wyss, and I have my beautiful, wonderful, radiant co-host slash host, Dr. Julie Wyss, the hostess with the mostest.
Look, I'm dressed like milk.
You kind of are, yeah. You got, yep. Look like milk. Cottage cheese, whatever.
Oh.
Yeah, it's got the little fingers.
Yep, thanks.
Yep, little, like a snowball.
Well, I just thought this would be a really good topic. You know, in Wisconsin, it's June Dairy Days,
It
and
is
so
June
everybody's
Dairy
talking
Month,
about
yep.
you go to your bank or the credit union and you get your ice cream. There's going to be breakfast on the farms.
They serve ice cream at the credit unions?
Yeah, you didn't have that?
No.
Oh, that sucks.
Ice cream at credit unions.
Yeah, you go in, they put the freezer out there for the month of June, and you get to go in and have ice cream.
June Dairy Days. Breakfast on the farm.
Yeah.
Did you know the story of breakfast on the farm with my family?
I'm not sure.
My grandpa had the first breakfast on the farm in Jackson County back in like the 70s. And that started breakfast on the farm in Jackson County with my grandpa.
Very cool.
The Wyss Haven Farms. You know it. Holsteins for days. Just milking, pulling udders nonstop. Like I remember being in the farm. Like people don't know that. Like I grew up on a dairy farm. I didn't live there, but God, we should have. We were there 4 out of 7 days a week. Like every weekend we were at my grandma and grandpa's. We were always at the farm and like milking cows, getting in trouble, jumping around in the hayloft and thinking we were going to fall through and break our ankles. And because that was a real danger, you know. And Dairy Days was a big thing. But I remember, taking care of cows back in the 80s and 90s is different than it is today. Milk is different, period. Mm-hmm. And I remember when it was a big thing on every milk cap that it said RBGH free, which is bovine growth hormone, which helps cows lactate.
Does that I don't even know that they say that anymore.
It doesn't say it. It's assumed, but you don't know. But that was on all the caps at one point.
That. Yep.
Because what was happening is that they were using bovine growth hormone to up their milk supply and their milk production. Now they just have way more cows. Mm-hmm. And it's all changed though, because automation has come in. In my mind, there's less farmer to animal interaction. So you know how when they talk about plants, right? And if you talk positive to your plants, they grow better. Like there's been studies on this, okay? It's the same thing with cows. Like if they get attention, if they get the love and affection that they need, they're better, healthier animals. Same thing with humans. Mm-hmm. And now when there's 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 head dairy farms, that interaction is different. You have dairy farms that are kicking out 13 to 20 calves a day. Mm-hmm. And that has changed from having 3 calves a week. You know, and all of that then changes on the production value of what's coming out of that cow. And I look at it as, yes, my grandpa's cows were vaccinated. I remember the vets coming out and taking care of the cows. But I also remember how much my grandpa loved those cows, and every one of them were named. And that was a big deal. When I was a kid, when my grandpa was really, really busy, they'd turn the barn over twice. And what that means is that in the barn, they had 50 stalls. And if they turned it over, which means, I don't mean twice, but they turned it over. So those stalls were full 2 times during the night and 2 times during the morning. So they milked 100 head at one point, right before he retired. But there was usually 65 to 70. That was it. And that was enough milk that produced enough revenue to take care of my grandpa and my dad and took care of my grandma and all their kids, right? It's totally changed now. So the production value and everything has changed on how these cows are raised. And I mean, I'm probably going to piss people off saying this. I mean, I really will, because there's a lot of farmers who take a lot of pride in their farms now, and they should, because it's completely different than what it used to be. Mm-hmm. You can't make money in farming unless you are a massively large dairy or super, super small and what they call artisan. The in-between doesn't work anymore, which is really unfortunate because you're missing the whole point of it. Of farming mm-hmm. and taking care of the cows. And what's happened is that they've come in and just like with healthcare, they've said, well, it's the science. Like we follow the science. We follow the food science. We follow climate science. We follow all these different sciences. Well, trusting the science didn't do so well in 2020. And seeing how science has come along now in the genetics of cows, how they've altered the genetics, of seed and what they feed cows now, how they produce them, how they can get them to produce more milk than what they've ever produced before. Like, that to me is not okay. And I'm not ripping on dairy farmers at all. I think they're absolutely vital. It's been in my family for decades, for centuries. But it's really changed. And what really worried me a few years back was we were at a June Dairy Days, and we were at a breakfast on the farm. And they were talking about when the calf is born, they're taken away from the mom, but then the mom is milked, and that milk is then taken and pasteurized before they give it to the cow, to the baby calf. So they just killed it. Not the calf, but they killed the milk.
The whole purpose of milk.
They killed the whole purpose of it. They pasteurized it? Why does a baby calf need pasteurized milk from its mother?
To keep it safe.
But that's the thing.
Well, I think that's the same thing that happens if we move this over to babies, mm-hmm. to pregnancy, that there's so many wives' tales and other people like saying all this stuff of like, well, your milk isn't good enough for your baby. Right. You need to fortify your milk. Your mm-hmm. baby's not gaining weight. We need to fortify it. You need to do this. You need to give baby this, or you can't breastfeed. You have to actually do formula. So they do it in the cows, and we see what that looks like over there on the homestead and in the farmland. But yet it's happening here in our own homes, to our own families, to the food and the meal that's a perfect meal that's supposed to be given to our children, should we choose to breastfeed.
Well, if you have a mom in the dairy farm world, of a cow, and if she's not well taken care of, if she doesn't have good nutrition, if she's not pasture raised, if she doesn't get enough grass, enough alfalfa, enough greens, she then produces milk that isn't healthy enough for the calf to consume. So they refortify it with all these vitamins as well. And that then produces a sick cow. Cows more apt to get sick. Cows more apt to have major problems. Cows more apt to break their ankles when they're out on the lot, when they're in the yard moving around, versus being out in the fields. And that's the same when it comes across to humans. Mm-hmm. We are mammals, right? God's creation, and we're mammals. Mm-hmm. So we're designed to feed our children. We're designed to feed our babies. And calves, kids, they both start with C's, right? And children. And that's where we miss the boat as humans, because we feel that we've become smarter than what the body can actually do.
No, the body is made to make the absolute perfect meal.
Every time.
And I think that's the struggle that moms are maybe setting out, that they want to breastfeed.
Yeah.
And then they have everybody else battling them. Like I said about not mm-hmm. gaining weight, or, well, why would you want to do that? You can get so much better nutrition from formula. And I beg to differ, and just like, of what they're going to be doing with the cows, all the different formulas have been fortified, things injected into them, things taken out. And what maybe started off as a really good product is now chock full of a bunch of other man-made things that aren't natural for the baby to be ingesting.
Yeah, and that's not okay. And they've brought the vitamin world into the cow world, just like they brought the vitamin world into humans. And, because we know that stuff isn't full of vitamins like it's supposed to anymore, that we basically rob the first 6 inches of soil of the normal nutrients and minerals it needs, that now we're giving cows minerals. I remember when I was young, I was 15, and I was milking cows for my neighbor, and I was feeding them. And we would put out the scoop. So there was grain, and actually we were feeding hay silage that night, which smells so good. And we were feeding hay silage. And I remember my neighbor coming up to me, and she said, "Hey, you need to put this on all the cows' food." And I looked at it, and it looked like black pepper. And I literally said, "Is this pepper?" And she laughed. She's like, "No, Skip, it's not. It's their vitamins. It's the minerals that they need." And I looked at her, and at that time I was so naive and 15, and I was just like, "Well, don't they get the minerals from the hay?"
Grass.
That's it just came out. And I don't think like I do now. It just came out. It just was common sense, right? She's like, "No, we have to give them extra now because the hay doesn't have it in it." And it's like, but that's what they eat. So why do all of a sudden do we need to give them all of these different minerals? And it was a mineral block, right? And out in the calf yard and in the pastures, they would put out these things called mineral blocks. They were salt licks and mineral blocks. And the cows would sit there and lick them and get their minerals in and stuff because it just wasn't in the topsoil anymore. And this has been going on since the 80s.
Well, and I think that's like the frustrating thing, that if you take any of your food labels and you think like, "Oh, I'm eating like a really well-rounded diet," when you turn over the label and you start looking at the foods that you eat, everything is fortified, which that means that the substance to begin with was probably a really good substance, that they've broke it all down, took out all the good stuff, and they're going to fortify it with their man-made stuff to make it back up to a wholesome, better product.
Yeah.
Whereas if we would just eat the thing from the ground, or from, how it was originally made, usually that substance is what we need. And so many things are fortified, which is really difficult. So then if you're only eating fortified foods, chances are then your diet yourself, you're definitely going to be lacking.
Yeah. And, my dairy farmers out there that take care of their cows really well, their diets aren't lacking. But that's why we have all of these different neutral companies that come in, co-ops and stuff, and try to get the best healthy food for their cows as possible. And that's why farming has become extremely expensive, because you can't just feed them hay anymore. You can't just feed them haylage or corn silage, and that it affects their diet. And it's the same thing with raising kids. And and now here's the funny thing is now we are actually developing allergies and intolerances to dairy. And if we look at the Bible, here's what's really funny. In the Bible, the two biggest food sources that they talk about in the Bible is not red meat. God did, he talks about us eating animals and stuff in the Bible. But milk and honey are the two most commonly talked about food sources in the Bible. Milk and honey. And yes, there's different meanings to that, and there's different things going on. But milk and honey are the two things that sustain the body during this period, right? And manna, which is food, right? Which was a form of bread. But these are the things that, and now all of a sudden there's over half the population doesn't seem that they can even tolerate dairy. Because of how it's made
and broken down and pasteurized. And again, if we would just go back to the original product, right? It's kind of like when they remake movies. Like the first one's always best, right? And then there's the second episode, the third, the fourth, the fifth. And if you would, the first one is always the best. That comes with our food as well.
I remember my coming home, and the only milk my dad would ever drink had to come from the bulk tank. It had to. And the thing is that most farmers drink from the bulk tank. They get their milk from their bulk tank. They don't drink what's in the stores. That's a big deal.
That should be a red flag for everybody to
right?
actually understand.
Yeah, like milk should coat the glass.
Like a wine.
Like way different. It should be thick. And you should drink milk. Milk from a cow is slightly sweet. It's good when it's slightly warm, not hot, but room temperature. The flavor profile changes and it's even better. And it goes down well. Raw milk's amazing. It's incredible. But getting whole milk from the store is not the same. Even if you get organic, it's still been pasteurized. It's still been heated and had every bug and bacteria and virus, if they were there, killed, and then refortified, repackaged, water added, all these different things. And the funny thing is that I find really hilarious is that most people drink skim milk. And that's what you give baby calves when you're trying to wean them off of their mom. So then you can get, and the reason why calves are weaned off their mom and not letting calves wean off naturally over time is because if we wean calves off early, mom then freshens and then she's allowed to get back into the herd and have her milk harvestable. That's part of major part of farming is that when a mom births a calf, you can't milk her. Her milk then is not for human consumption. And then they get the calf off of mom and get the calf on water, which then allows mom to do what they call freshen. And then once you freshen the cow, which means they can get back to normal milk production, then you can start milking them again. But if you accidentally milk a cow that isn't freshened, that's is in the freshening process, it can ruin the entire bulk tank of milk. It's kind of crazy. And this is just basic stuff. Like, I'm not a genius. This is just when I grew up. And things have really changed since then. But I think the over-industrialization of how we've done food and how we've done milk has really changed everything. And it's actually changed our health for the negative. Because we shouldn't have to have almond milk and cashew milk and rice milk and oat milk and all these things that you and I drink, right? Because I can't get my hands on organic dairy. I mean, on actual raw dairy, it's hard. And I can't get my hands on raw organic, which is even harder. And I don't know if you drink it then anyways. I don't really know.
Not a fan.
Not a fan, no.
But I will always try it. But I think it's like the conclusion of all of this is just to get it straight from
the source.
Right, straight from the source. And anytime that it's, mingled with somebody else or things added, taken away, you're defeating the whole purpose of why you went to go get milk.
Yep, milk in the first place, and that's to feed, right? To feed our babies, to feed our calves, and they're all cute, they're all wonderful, and they are the future of everything. Kids are, and so are cows, so are bees, so are baby deers. Those are all, but they all, like cows, deer, they all are on their mom, and deer cycle off when there's time. It's the same
thing with goats.
Yep, right? Same thing with goats as well, and goat's milk, which is great to drink as well. So these are all sources that have been out there, and we come back to moms now full circle and talk about breastfeeding, and we've talked about breastfeeding on here tons of times. One of the most special, amazing processes that a human can go through, both mom and baby, correct? And again, though, we've come in and tried to change it. We've really freaked moms out and scared them. And scared them into breastfeeding and scared them away from breastfeeding at the same time. Two different moms, one scared into breastfeeding and one scared away from it.
Which is just it's heartbreaking because it's heartbreaking when there's a mom that is, yes, I want to breastfeed. And when there's not the support around her, and then there's other people saying that, well, you're doing it wrong, or it shouldn't be like that, or, it's so much easier. Yeah, it's so much easier just, why are you getting up during the middle of the night? Just give them this formula instead, to make them feel fuller, add things to the milk. It's just, it can be a big struggle.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes if we would just block all of those things out and just realize, okay, what we are making ourselves is all that baby truly needs.
Exactly. And if you are a mom that eventually they can't breastfeed,
Mm-hmm.
which does happen, where baby, and a lot of that comes back to baby's ability to latch.
Yeah.
And that comes back to the birth process, which comes back to getting your kids checked after they're born by a chiropractor to make sure things are working and talking correctly. And, all those things set that child up to eventually be on formula,
Mm-hmm.
which is just man-made chemicals in a jar.
So then that's where then you need to be choosing a product.
Yep.
Goat's milk is the next closest thing
Yep.
to breast milk. You can get regular goat's milk from your farmer. You can get powdered goat's milk, but there's also other formula-based goat milk brands that are European brands that are now readily available within the States that are going to be much higher rated and not fortified, like the Gerber, the Enfamils, what,
The
that you,
Similacs,
all of the
of them.
samples that you get, right? It's just like drug commercials. They're giving you those samples so that, then the things that you need to buy.
Yeah. It's all consumer based, right? Yet you're going to produce it the best yourself. Or you can always have a mom available, that has donor milk.
Mm-hmm.
We always have donor milk available in our office. We always have the ability to give it to our moms if we can. And that has been a massive blessing to have moms that have donated as well to help with that. This has been a fun episode. I didn't think I was going to go that far into farming.
Me neither.
Yeah, well, I do know a little bit about it, and I'm not an expert, so please don't take me as that. And this is all 100% my opinion as to how things are going, just so you know. So, you got anything else, Dr. Julie, during these June dairy days?
I was going to moo like a cow, but I'm not.
You're not going to moo, and you're not going to...
No. And that's all that we have today, folks.
That's it, folks. Have a great week. Get out there. Have a great week. Bye, everyone.